I wonder how much news it's going to get. I'm very interested in this. What
Mm.
these two economists shown. This is a study we commissioned about 4 months ago to look at a more realistic look at inflation and bump that up against output numbers and see where that puts us in terms of the business cycle. So the business cycle is charted based on recovery and recessions, and the recessions are marked by two successive declining quarters of GDP. And that, in real terms, since you're not really interested in nominal GDP, you're interested in it as adjusted for inflation. But but to the extent that your GDP numbers are affected by inflation is really determined by what you consider inflation to be. And it's now still a minority view, but still very much mainstream, that our numbers of inflation are fake because they exclude uh, housing index prices and insurance and include all sorts of hedonic adjustments that count every government regulation as a plus. It's inaccurate, wildly inaccurate on matters of health insurance because they measure it against the profitability of um, of healthcare companies, which is supposed to be internal measure of how much is consumed, which is supposed to count against health insurance. So you could actually have a situation like we had in 2021 and 2022 where health insurance premiums were soaring, but so was consumption of healthcare resources because everybody was sick as dogs. And that was counted as a decrease in the price of health insurance. So once you start making these corrections to CPI data, you end up with something really, really different. So I commissioned the study from E.J. Antony and Peter St. Onge, as two economists that are following this data. You wouldn't believe it, but it actually is true. Actually, maybe it wouldn't surprise you. Most economists don't follow government data releases at all. They don't care. They look at them when it comes time to write a paper for tenure or promotion or something like that. But otherwise, they're not following it on a daily basis. These two guys do. And so they're real specialists. In fact, E.J. Antony got his PhD in public finance and macroeconomic statistics, so he really knows the stuff. Anyway, I put them to work on this one narrow problem. Like, give me a more realistic view of inflation and bump that up against output numbers so we can come up with genuine GDP numbers and find out where we really are in the business cycle. And there were two surprising results from their study, which took about 4 months to do. One is that inflation has been running since 2021 twice the rate that government admits. So right now, if you do a CPI check between 2020 and right now, you're going to come up with a 20% loss in purchasing power of the domestic dollar in terms of goods and services. And according to their data, which and they show all their work, they've come up with numbers that are 40%, so twice the rate, which is quite remarkable, but consistent probably with what you experience, and also consistent with what most industries are reporting: grocery prices, cars, and certainly housing. So there's that. But the really surprising result comes once you mix that with nominal GDP numbers without even adjusting the GDP, which I think maybe we're going to do a round two in which we do that. But just looking at the nominal output numbers and comparing that to the inflation numbers produces something very interesting. You remember in the first two quarters of 2022, there was two successive quarters of declining GDP. And technically that should have been declared a recession, but they didn't declare because of this, based on the strength of the jobs numbers, right? Well, it turns out that was real. Not only was it real, but it continued. And it's continued all the way through the second quarter of 2024, meaning that we've been in recession for 2.5 years and nobody has sounded the alarm. So that is the reality that they document in this paper. And of course, this has
Wow.
affected household income and all kinds of output, from factory orders to everything else
Mhm.
involved in American commercial life at the producer and wholesale level. They're documenting a very deep recession having begun in the first quarter of 2022 and extending all the way to the present. So that's the bad news that's going to come out tomorrow morning.